as you see here, we're going to talk about what makes Nordic TV drama travel, and we've talked about that a lot now with David and Nancy. And I wanted to start by asking actually everyone in the panel. I think we can say for a fact that Nordic TV drama is traveling more than before, but why do you think this is? And now we could get the Nordic perspective and the US perspective on this.
Okay.
Maybe Åsa.
I'll try
Stefan.
to start answering the question. One reason I think is that we all watch a lot of television, and the other thing is that I think that we produced a lot of soaps years ago, and a lot of people started writing, and we put the writers up front, and we've managed to put the auteur tradition a little aside, and just wanting the writers to come up front, and we believe in them.
That's great.
I think as well that the work process is very important here, because we adapted the American version with the writer's king, but we still made it into a Scandinavian way of doing it. So it's not as, I think it's not as tough as yours, but as we have heard this morning and from you. But we still try to keep this one vision, and I think we've learned to produce it much nicer. We've got the merging with the film industry. We've got a lot of people not only working in television, but from the film industry coming in, working with us. The directors, the DOPs, of course the actors. And then we have in Denmark, we have a very good film school, which has really made a very good script line education. And I think especially the directors and the DOPs has really developed into very professional people. And then I think another thing we've worked a lot on in Denmark, at least, that television is not only talking heads, cut from head to head, but make it more visual and make it a more filmic visual style. So, and then, as David said before, above all, character, because that's what travels, universal characters, people we can identify with. So I think that's a big part of it.
I think we must say that it's a wonder that has happened, I think. And I think maybe we also have to thank some authors and writers that has sort of plowed the way for us because of the Scandinavian crime that sort of went ahead and maybe started a curiosity. I think I read in the Los Angeles Times many years ago about the Scandinavian crime writers, with Henning Mankell, for instance, and then Stieg Larsson, of course, has created a huge interest for this region that might have opened the door for also the TV material.
So would you say it's kind of like a process of writers, films, and then comes TV?
I think so.
Yeah.
Two other things. I think money is one thing that we actually decided a couple of years ago, both of us, or the two big broadcasters. But I was talking Sweden. No, to actually put more money into it, higher budgets. That's one thing. And the other thing is that actually to decide to go for in Sweden and in Denmark what we call a long-running series. It was a soap for, say, 30 episodes a year, but what we've done is that we've focused on doing 10 or 20 episodes a year, and practice, telling stories that way.
But I also thought it was interesting because I think The Killing, when Mikkel and Kristen started, looking for a writer, and as much as I think writers were responding to it, wanted to be involved, the networks were still, they were still trying to get the networks to watch and to pay attention, and it was really below people's radar. And I think the second AMC watched and got excited and bought it, I mean, it was almost like they were a minute ahead of the curve, because then it suddenly became on HBO's radar and Showtime's, and everybody, his feeling was, why didn't we get that? And it was just, and then the girl with the dragon tattoo hit, and I just feel like, we got out there just a second in front of this huge wave. It was exciting.
So serendipity then a little bit as well, with also Mikkel Bondesen, that has done a great job for you for many years, and he also opened that door for you, created the interest. And
but even just at the risk of being repetitive, but a month or so ago I watched The Bridge or Bron, which I thought the 10 episodes of that had an extraordinary relationship in those two cops in that show, and while there's a lot of other good thrillerish drama in it, what kept that show beating was those two people, and that's a show that works both great in its own terms, and I think would work great in its American version. So I think it's just really it's whether it's The Killing of the Bridge or a lot of the things that you guys are producing or other things that we've been fortunate enough to get involved in. I think that's the part of it.
I think that we talked about this earlier. I think in Scandinavia we have really good with characters because we haven't. I mean, if you look at Sweden, we haven't had a war for 200 years, so we've developed this bourgeoisie kind of angst, with Ingmar Bergman. The most dangerous thing that ever can happen to you is that you're locked by your father into the wardrobe. we had famine in 1866. We haven't been at war at all. So I think we really thrillers and crime is a lot about bourgeoisie, character-driven conflicts.
So you're all fucked up.
Yeah, we're all fucked up. So we could all be writers. We have. We're all dysfunctional. So I really think that we're good with characters because we're all fucked up.
Excellent. I think you now learned something.
Well, the Bron and Forbrydelsen, of course, is crime, but it's other stuff being picked up as well, like real humans, sci-fi, Hubots, humanoid robots, and Dog is half-hour comedy. We also have one of the producers,
and we have
up there,
and we have this political drama called Borgen, which is picked up by the BBC worldwide in LA. Yes.
So with all these different, you can't really pinpoint that it's only crime, but from the American perspective, can you pinpoint what is Nordic? Is it possible to see what is common in these? Or is there anything common in it?
I don't know. First of all, I don't feel smart enough about your region to really venture a statement about what is Nordic.
I mean, from your perspective.
No, I actually would go at it the other way. I mean, I think that I think what is interesting about what is being done here is what is universal, and I think everything that you guys just said. I mean, the amount of emotion that is sometimes repressed and sometimes out on the surface, but a lot of Sturm und Drang that's going on in the interior of the characters that you guys dramatize. I think that is very identifiable, and the specificity of it is something that you guys render really well, which is what makes it appealing to the U.S. But I think that if I was going to attack some level of American drama, I think a lot of American drama, whether it's television or movies or other things, tends to be very blunt, tends to be very, there's my target and I'm going to go after you and I'm Jack Bauer and I'm going to fucking take you down. And there's a certain appeal to that. I mean, American drama has been built on that for a lot of years.
We've had a lot more war.
We tend to be a very cowboy country. We don't tend as a country to be that introspective. And I think that part of what's interesting about so much of the Scandinavian drama, which is very compelling and has urgency and has real tension, but also has a level of introspection. We were talking the other day in a different context about that clearly not all of, but many of the most compelling lead characters in Scandinavian drama are female. Females tend to be more introspective because, let's face it, men are dumb, and we don't think, and we just try to charge ahead and make mistakes and screw up. Women tend to think about what they're doing, and therefore they have a higher percentage of success. So I think some of those things are all related and coupled. So I think that part of what's attractive to us is that level of thoughtfulness, which is not solely a Scandinavian attribute, but is an interesting complement, and in some ways sort of a different angle that not all of, because there's a lot of American drama that does do what we're talking about and is introspective and is thoughtful, and we can all cite a number of shows that do that, but it attacks sort of the best of what American drama aspires to, and therefore it's very appealing to us.
You talked about that you're here now, not only to listen to your own beautiful voice, but to find talent. And with Forbrydelsen, it was done. You saw the ready show; it already had the success. But I know with Real Humans, for example, it didn't even air in Sweden before you sold the remake rights. I don't know with Bron if the show was already produced or.
It was in production.
Yeah. So I wanted to know, like, where in the process do you get in, and how do you find this project? Because I guess, how are these people supposed to get it out to the US?
I mean, realistically, I mean, it's not useful whether you're Scandinavian or from LA. It's not useful for us to just say, have somebody walk in and say, oh, I want to do a show about a cop. You want to buy it? That will be a very, that conversation will end very quickly. But so we do respond to a level of detail and specificity. But in addressing your question, arguably the biggest frenzy among buyers last summer, or at least one of them, if not the biggest, was over a series of books called the Backstrom books, of Swedish crime novels, which were not shot or produced anywhere, but were brought to the U.S. by a couple of representatives, and actually we brought them early, and we made a bid, and then we were quickly outbid by a number of other viewers, and they were bought for a tremendous amount of money by the Fox network, which actually did not have anything to do with us, even though, yes, both companies have the word Fox in them. By the way, I have nothing to do with Fox News, in case anybody wants to ask that question.
Good that we cleared that.
No, it's just in case anybody says, do you have to? No. So the Fox network bought those books, and that pilot actually is not going to be made in this particular moment, but may get made down the line. But that was a case where it was just a set of books that dramatized a really flamboyant detective and really kind of funny, outrageous character.
Which are the? I don't.
The Leif GW Persson's
Leif GW
Bäckström
Persson.
character.
Yeah,
Bäckström.
Okay.
Who has actually been shot, but in earlier pieces.
But we never saw that.
I know.
All we saw were the books.
But I mean, that's our reality as Swedish producers. That is the Scandinavian. That is you have a good eye for things, and I mean, during the bridge, for instance, we had people from Fox calling our writer Hans directly, bypassing us, which is really insulting, by the way. And there's other cases, like for instance, this 3 Seconds, Roslund and Hellström, that was bought directly by Kudos in England and New Regency. So they bypass. This will never ever be produced on the Swedish market because
so they go
the American
directly on
took
the
it.
right.
So we really have to. Well, it's a difficult. It's
first. Melina Jason from Fox.
I have a wonderful experience with Fox TV Studios because they actually read. And when I saw Lulu and Leon, because I met Thomas Gemeltoft, there were multitudinous episodes.
Can you hold it closer, please?
They actually sat down and watched all of them. And I was saying to them, well, there's one about a hooker, and there's a really cool one about a teenage kid, and they watch all of it. And my joy and my quandary is that when I meet Scandinavian producers, some of them give me the most amazing material, and I know that I can call Nancy, David, or some of the other executives who work for David, and they'll thoughtfully read them. What's been challenging for me is when Scandinavian and German producers say to me, we have something about, a war in 1632, and, you guys aren't that smart. But we read. We don't just do Jerry Bruckheimer stuff, And I don't know, because I think that if I start submitting to David and Nancy scripts in Swedish, Danish, Icelandic, whatever, untranslated about, a war going on or wolves taking over a snowy wood, I'll be out the door, and they won't have me producing anymore.
With the bridge, we had there's different remakes in pre-production. We have when we met the English writer, he started pointing out things that not even Hans had seen during the script process. They've really been much more ambitious, much more. And now I met with Caroline Bernstein, who's my colleague, and it was the same thing. She started asking things that we couldn't give her the right answer.
Well, I would only say
really
that if someone is going to submit something, and I read hundreds and hundreds of scripts and things, and I have access to these very, very bright people, who I think are the best studio in Hollywood and the nicest. Please.
We pay her.
Can you number one make sure that there's some sort of English translation? Because otherwise it's challenging.
Yes. Sadly, we're very illiterate, and we only really can read English.
Well, and then lastly, and maybe David would speak to this, a lot of the things that have been submitted to me lately are period pieces. And I'm always in a quandary what to say about that, because they watch HBO and they do these extraordinary things, but I don't know what to say when they say, come on, you guys must have read a history book. You can't just do Jerry Bruckheimer. So what do I say when they submit me historical epics in this kind of thing?
Well,
Thanks.
You know, whether it's European or American, I think period lends. I mean, there clearly are period shows on the air, but they're tricky, and it depends on what period. It depends, again, if it's period politics, unless it's really readily translatable to 2012, it tends to be not interesting to people. The easiest things to translate that are period tend to be either action-oriented, Western, or they tend to be highly romantic. But if it's grim period, if it's squalor or people dying bloodily in the mire, that doesn't seem like very entertaining. I'll find something else to watch other than that. I think period, I think in some ways puts more pressure. A project that's period has probably more pressure on it to be entertaining and in some way fun than sometimes that a contemporary project might have. Now that said, we're developing some period things, and I mean we have something we're developing that's set in ancient Egypt. So we'll go back and we'll try stuff that feels like it's different. But there are some U.S. networks that'll do period. There are many that won't. So it immediately circumscribes our marketplace in terms of where we can sell things to. It makes it very specific in terms of how one can get a particular project financed if it's period. And by period, I mean sort of earlier, say, than the 1960s. I mean, I think any from the 60s on may be period, but it's probably more perceived as more accessible and more contemporary. And there's a lot of projects that sort of live from the 60s to the present day that I think are very feasible. But if you're much earlier than that, then it kind of falls in a different category. And then you're probably really looking at HBO or a couple of networks that are likely to attack that in the U.S. and not much more than that.
But there's one thing with period, especially if we all have this crime as bread and butter, and there's one thing that really wants you to go period, and that is the fact that you get rid of all the mobile telephones, the computers, and you're back to like regular police work. It's not like when they were calling them, and it's more fun in a way.
Yeah, that is true.
And a few period cop shows have sold recently too, so it's fun. Yeah. I think USA bought one, which was a surprise.
You wanted to say something, Stefan?
No, Lasse said that there will be less product placement though, but
well, that's NRK. That's not us.
Okay.
So you've identified strong characters, preferably maybe women, and taking place in modern time. Could you give us some more key factors of what you're looking for?
And then break the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll set you
exactly,
the rules,
but that's always, you have to know the rules to be able to break them.
Well, I mean, again, I think everybody in the room knows this. I mean, TV series are very tricky because you're basically saying, is this a world and a character and a place where you can situate story that you can come back to 100 times, or essentially make 100 episodes or more? That's very much sort of the U.S. MO. That's not the British MO of maybe you make 6 episodes or whatever, and maybe you come back for a second season and then you're done, and isn't that great? We really need to think about things that are very repeatable, which is why so many TV shows, particularly in the U.S., are built around crime, or they're built around medicine, or built around law, or things that it's easy to understand where story comes from, where a client can, quote, walk in the door, and there can be a life or death set of stakes, and you can resolve it. So part of what we always struggle with then is how do we do things that aren't about those 3 franchises, which are the kind of the 3 pillars of American television. And you can do it.
And that was doctors, lawyers, and police.
Doctors, lawyers, and police. But it helps you when you have, even if you're telling a very character-based story, even if you're telling a very emotional and sophisticated story, if you still have places where a story can come from, a great case in point, I think, is a show called 6 Feet Under, which was a kind of a very respected show from HBO a number of years ago, and which most people think of as a family drama about brothers and family. But what was brilliant about that show is that it was set in a mortuary, which God forbid anyone would think that was a particularly attractive location for a TV series. And yet, each week, they started with a death. Somebody died. There was a family of some kind or another that was related to the person who died, and that family walked into that mortuary and say, "Oh, bury our person, and in the meantime, we're going to now suffuse you with all of our problems." And those problems of those mourners were therefore, hopefully, thematically connected to the problems of that family drama. And so they had a tremendous amount of story that walked in each week with that mortuary. So it was kind of a brilliant way to have to have repeatable story that was just kept going on. Nip Tuck is another, I think, a very good example, which is essentially a serialized story of two guys who were running a surgical practice together. But each week somebody would walk in, or more than one somebody would walk in, and they would want some kind of plastic surgery done, and they would say, tell me what you don't like about yourself. And a lot of story could come through the door each week with that. I mean, on The Shield, which was a show we did, most people who think of The Shield think of it for the ongoing drama of Vic Mackey, the ongoing drama of those characters and dealing with their ends justifies the means kinds of angst. But we had crime drama. We had at least 2, sometimes 3 individual crime stories that we dealt with in the beginning, middle, and ends that were part of the structure of those episodes. So finding a world, finding a culture where which is different. The culture of big love set in that Mormon community was a great culture for saying, here's a way to look at marriage or long-term relationships, which many of us are in, but it's going to be that much more theatrical because this guy's married to 3 women. I am happily married to 1, but I can't imagine being happily married to 3. So it was a great way to make the problems that everybody faces in their relationships be much more flamboyant and theatrical. And then they brought in all this other drama that came out of that compound. So I think it's the things you said, but it's also about a world that can feed a lot of story to you, because story is ever consuming, and you've got to write 100 episodes, and how are you going to keep that, keep the plot in motion and keep enough stuff for those characters to be banging up against, and to put yourself in a different world where you feel like, well, I haven't quite seen that. I mean, I've seen a crime show, but I've never seen a crime show quite like The Bridge, or quite like The Killing, or quite like The Shield, or quite like Dexter, or Breaking Bad, or the other best shows in those genres.
We do all agree.
You just nod
brilliantly put.
Well, it's pretty obvious that your network has bought Nordic series and are interested in that. But what's the general? I mean, if we can bask a little for once when we have the glory here in the Nordic countries, what's the general? Is it the talk of the town in Hollywood? Or is that just something that we think here?
Good question.
Please say yes, David. Please say yes.
She wrote the script.
I feel so powerful right now. No, look, I think both yes and no. I mean, I think yes, there's an enormous amount of American interest in Nordic drama, and as Åsa said, I mean, it's probably in some part from an American perspective really related to Stieg Larsson. I mean, I think that really was the thing that made the average consumer say, "Oh, wait a second, they write this shit up there." So I think there is no way to understate the impact, to overstate the impact of those books. But yes, in general, I think, as everybody said, The Killing was part of a wave that is a big wave and a big interest, and a lot of American companies, we are hardly singular in this respect, are interested in what's going on up here. The other part of it, however, is I think there's this interest in drama around the world. I mean, I think that you look at Israel, which has produced treatment and Homeland, and an amazing number of series for a small country that have translated incredibly well to the U.S. I mean, it used to be that America really only looked at the U.K. as a market for potential remakes. Although there's a lot of Ugly Betty coming from Betty LaFay, and a lot of Latin American and South American. We've bought a number of projects that have started as Spanish language that we're looking to translate into the U.S. We've bought stuff coming out of Spain and Italy, and so there's clearly a lot of television production going on around the world, not just in English language, that people are very curious about. There's probably more heat in Scandinavia than there is in any place else, but there's just an increasing awareness of television around the world as a place that we can look at for generating shows of our own.
Things travel much more today.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a translate button on Google, so everybody. World is shrinking. I think that's one of the reasons.
I had a comment or question here.
We are extremely thankful that you're coming here and sharing your ideas of what we could come to you with. How could we make this perfect shopping mall for Scandinavia crime stories or television drama for people like you? What would make you even create stronger relations to successful professionals here, and what could we do to make this even stronger?
Except for this day today.
Again, I'm tempted to make a smart-ass answer. We're very open to bribery. No, joke, kidding, not serious. But Nancy is, however. But I'm not. No, look, I think that I don't really have a good answer to that. I mean, I think that we're just really respectful of the work that all you guys are doing, that you're already doing. We're eager to look at the things that have been produced. We're eager to look at the things that are yet to be produced, but that are in some form where we can actually take them in and get a sense of them and assess them. You know, as I think I mentioned earlier, I mean, we've happily gone after the produced formats, but we've also found writers who we've engaged to write original things who are from this part of the world. You know, I don't really have a better answer than I would have if I was talking to you in Beverly Hills. I mean, I think we're just looking for good stories and good characters, and we're happy to read them, watch them, ingest them in whatever way they're available. And the only other thing I'd say is really what Melinda said earlier. I think that the more specific you can be with us, the more easy it is for us to get excited. The more, if you're just saying,
you have to package it.
Hey, I got this really great detective in my head, and I think he's going to be really funny and smart and great, and you want to do it. I don't know how to respond to that, but the more you can put something down on paper or make something and really come from a place that's that's personal. I think it's true of any kind of writing. It's true of television writing as it is in any other form. Even if you're writing something that you mean to be popular entertainment, and of course we all want to be entertaining, the more that you can connect to something personal that makes a character personal to you, that will always come through. That will always shine. I mean, I'll tell writers, whether it's in this kind of format or anyplace else, when you start to get cynical, when you start to write to the market, when you read Deadline, Hollywood, and Variety too much, and you say, "Oh, I know what those assholes will want. I'll write that piece of stuff." That's the moment when you die.
Can I comment?
Yeah, sure, please.
I think one of the important things right now is that we should never be cynical. We should never. But then on the other hand, I'm like the second row coming in with the bridge after you guys, and the tremendous success of that. I have that. It's kind of boring because every meeting starts out with 15 minutes about the killing, and then we do. It's like, but I mean, it's so important. This success. We should analyze what was it. Well, I mean, if we have to be specific, and we have to do it all.
And we have, and we have to be aware of our marketplace. But having said that, because we are just a way station. We can develop stuff, but we ultimately have to find a home, and we have to see what the marketplace will buy. And sometimes we have a sense that we have an uphill battle on an idea that might be so out there. But if it's something that's genuinely exciting us and feeling really fresh, we hope that our our counterparts at the network are going to feel the same. And I think we
to collaborate with Scandinavia.
Yeah. It's been great. It's been great. I mean,
watch your words now.
Yeah.
Yes, but apart from other thing about doing things with your heart, because I think one thing we really try to do at Danish Broadcasting is never ask a writer to write a specific series for us. We always ask what they want to tell. What story do you want to tell? What story is in your mind and in your heart? And what do you want to? What is your message to the world with this? Why do you want to do it? Because if we say we have a very good idea for a hospital series here with some doctors and stuff, could you do that? Everybody would say yes, but it's not going to be worthwhile. I think it really has to come from the writer, from the one vision thing. That is very important. Because you can get everybody to write anything, but it's not important. You really have to focus on that. And then it's going to go into the market, I'm sure, if it's really comes from the heart. Yes, exactly.
You can also do. I mean, the way we did it, because we had a situation where with the Swedes we were buying all the Danish stuff, and the Danes wouldn't buy anything from us. So my question to the scriptwriter was, what can we possibly do? How can we create something that is kind of Danish, kind of looks. It's completely Swedish, but it looks Danish, and it's organic. So that was the only thing we said, and it kind of worked.
It was so good.
There's lots of talk about this new Danish series, which pisses me off a bit. But
I understand that. Sure, it's your series. It's Swedish. Yes.
It's a Swedish-Danish.
You had a question, Trisha.
More of a comment really for Lars that I hope, now that we've gone through and shown how in the U.S. the writer is king, you understand why somebody at Fox would call it writer, so it's not as insulting.
No, you're right. You're right.
Okay, you were ready.
No, but actually to that point, I mean, I spent as did Nancy and as currently does Melinda a good chunk of my life as a non-writing producer. So I actually think the role is incredibly valuable. And you know, we talked earlier, and you talked in your session about the showrunner's job, and in some level, it is an impossible job. I mean, in some level, although there are a few people who defy the odds and do it, the amount of work that goes into, as you said, not just dealing with generating the whatever number of scripts are being asked for, but dealing with casting, dealing with production, dealing with the network, dealing with the studio, dealing with editorial, which is massive, and all that stuff, is a huge and sort of impossible job to do. And most writers find someone to work with to complement them, who can help them on those aspects of the job that they just don't physically have time to do. And a lot of writers that we've worked with have partners who are non-writing producers, but whom they trust to spend the time on the set, to spend their time dealing with the politics of people who wear versions of suits, or deal with the production logistics, or deal with the actors, or deal with that. So non-writing producers do have a very valid role. Again, it really depends on their relationship with the writer, and if they're at odds with the writer, then their validity sometimes suddenly becomes much undermined. But you know, we think non-writing producers are very valuable in the development process, in the process of bringing us things, in the process of bringing us writers, in the process of bringing material, and in the ongoing process of making shows. So even though the writer is king, even the king needs a really good prime minister, and frequently the non-writing producer can be that if they have the political skills and the diplomacy and the clarity of agenda in order to do that.
We found very effective non-writing showrunners. I mean, usually, again, the buck stops with the writer. So the non-writing producer can get everything there, but knowing that usually it's the writer showrunner who will make the ultimate, decision. So.
We had a question over here.
Do you need me to use the mic, or?
I can repeat it if it's not really long.
So I just had two comments. One was
Okay, you'll use the mic. Comments. That was the key word. Please go ahead.
Brief one. So in the presentation earlier today, we heard some of the scriptwriters talking about creativity under constraints, right? So I just wanted to tie that back to the comment of, is it the writer who should, write freely, who generates the story versus the constraints model? And the second comment I had was, so I'm a film and media studies scholar, and what I'm hearing from some of the comments here is that, okay, so how can we do better? How can we, get our products to export, etc. And I mean, there are several. I mean, there are good models in Silicon Valley, right? Where entrepreneurs who may be from the Nordic area come back, mentorship programs, those kinds of things. So my question was really, are there and who are the successful Scandinavian oriented or based script writers who are working in Hollywood, and can those be brought back for resource?
No.
All right, so how do you get there?
I think we have
No, please.
the ones that succeeded, that you guys. You have, they're already doing this. I think but it's a long process. We're much more like the English than the Americans, and where the writers are strong but quite individual, and it's quite analog. They write. One person goes into this lonely room and starts writing, and I think it's very difficult. I mean, you could hear some of the questions here this morning. Also, they immediately start talking about the harsh part, or what's the we focus on the difficulties with this writer's room because we're not used to it. It's like a scary thing, but I really encourage you all to try it because it looks really interesting. I would love to try it.
Yeah, I mean, look, if I could, I'm sorry. I speak to the second. I mean, look. And with all respect to what was said this morning, I think you ask, a writer gets to talk to somebody like Patricia, and they say, well, tell me your problems, and they vent, because of course they vent, because it's a great opportunity to vent. And you can't put 7 or 8 or 10 people in a room for long stretches of time and not get arguments. I mean, that's, I'm sure if it put a random 8 of you in a room and stuck you together for 30 weeks, there might be some disagreements about something, what to have for lunch, I don't know what. But so there, of course, there's that. But I think that I'll be a smart ass yet again. And when you talk about should writers write without restraints, and I'll loosely paraphrase Robert Frost when he said, writing poetry without rules is like playing tennis with no net. And essentially, you can hit the ball a lot, but how do you know when you run? And I think that's true. I mean, I think that it is. Forget about the fact that, of course, television is a business, and as much as an art, and you need to make things that make money, and you need to be economically viable, or you can't make things again a second time. Of course, that's true. But I think even more meaningfully than that, writers just need, mostly 98% of the time, there are the rare exceptions, need people to bounce against, need people to say, well, that's lazy, or that's not as good as it can be, and that's not as smart as it can be. And I think when a writer's room works well, and most shows that work well have rooms that work well to some degree, it's because the writer who may have the initial thought about how a story should go gets challenged. And in most of the shows that we do, that lead writer will suggest, well, what about this way? And somebody else will, even if they are lower down in the hierarchy, and yes, rooms have hierarchy, but there is no world in the world, there is no business in the world that doesn't have some version of hierarchy, and I think hierarchy is always a good thing. Right? But
right. You're right.
But even in defiance of the hierarchy, which a writer will say, no, I think you could do this. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? And out of that process, and it's why it takes as long to, quote, break a story as it does, is because people are challenging that idea, and people are saying, no, it could be this, no, what it could be that way. And out of that, hopefully, if the process is smartly handled, comes something better. And I think that yes, a lone writer can go off and write their great work and come back with 5 or 6 episodes, but especially in the UK in that model. But if you're trying to make 13 or 22 episodes in a year, it's not really feasible. Some writers rewrite every script. Some writers rely much more on their staffs, but all writers get something out of their staffs, and that process. And as I said earlier, even the process of then, once they've gotten the script that they submit, bouncing that against us, bouncing that against the network. The best piece of advice I think I could give a writer in this room is don't walk in angry. Because truly there is the mythology of the angry writer, and that mythology is for you to be a real artist, you have to be pissed off, and it's really. It doesn't mean you just are compliant and bow down with every note that you get. You don't have to do that either. But a smart writer listens to what's said. Whether it's said by the head of a network or the junior writer on your staff, and takes it in and thinks about it. And if somebody has one thing we always say when we give writer notes, we throw out solutions because we're trying to be helpful. But I couldn't care less if you agree with my solution. But I do want you to listen to my problem. If you can solve it in a better way than I can solve it, fantastic, because I'm not paid to solve problems. I'm paid to point them out. And I think that's how we really try to operate. So I think that and I think that's what a good writer's room does. That's what a good process with studios and networks do, is to sit there and challenge things and say, couldn't that be better? Couldn't that be smarter? Why would you do that? And ultimately, sometimes the writer is right and everybody else is wrong. Sometimes that does happen, and sometimes writers stick to their guns in a good way. But oftentimes a writer says, hey, you know what, I could make this better. And so I think that's the value of that process. And if you don't walk in angry, if you walk in open, which doesn't mean servile, but just walk in open, that's a much healthier way to have a career.
And Thomas, weren't you involved in bringing some Danish and Scandinavian writers to meet with showrunners in America? I remember a bunch of them came to Los Angeles.
Okay. Yes, but that was
Katrina
exchange.
Very good.
Yeah, but you have.
Katrina's going to talk later.
You have Spooner and Bond.
Yes,
yeah,
I mentioned
yes. You write. So that's the first time I think any Danish actually experienced to do some work. I think they think it's hard to work with you guys.
We're so nice. Well, we're going through a process.
But
I do think that there is a huge interest in learning more about the way you work and how to make ourselves more professional and even better. But I think also it's important not to forget that we really need to also continue to tell stories for the Swedish audience. We are reaching out for the international market, and everyone thinks that, wow, that would be the thing to have an international success. But I think maybe it's still going to start with an idea that can be brought to a Swedish channel and aired for a Swedish audience. So it's very important to stay true to that as well. And hopefully if it works here, it might also be interesting for the American market or someone else to remake if it's original enough and well written and well produced.
Yes, and especially because we are public service financed, license financed. No, you're not, but we are, Stefan and I, and you're working with SVT. So of course we have to focus on the local audiences. But I think the nice thing, if you hit something, you know, we started out with The Killing as a Danish TV series meant for the Danish audiences, and then it traveled in Scandinavia, and then it traveled into Europe, and now it's gone even to the US. So it is possible if you focus on what you want to do. I think.
I'm sorry, I think we have to wrap this up. We're kind of running out of time, but I'm going to give the word to Thomas and then to Mikael, and then we're going to have a break.
I would very much like to know, how is the atmosphere, the work relation between you and the cable or the broadcaster, the executives sitting there? Because I think, how do you work together? Is it a close
with the networks?
Yeah, and the cable, the executives. Is it a close relation? Is it because what we sometimes experience, and I think a lot of producers and writers will agree with me in that, is that there's a mistrust coming from the broadcaster to the producers, writers. And you can't work in mistrust. There's something good about Denmark's radio, the Swedish television, I think, because it's in-house, you work in trust. Trust is everything. I just like to know how it works in your atmosphere. Is it a harsh, tough thing?
I think I've been told to give the answer short. I think it's hard to generalize. I think it happens case by case. I think if a writer earns a relationship with a network where it's kind of what I said earlier, where the writer says, hey, I will take you seriously. I will pay attention to your notes. I will listen. I will be thoughtful about what you have to say. It tends to be trustworthy. I think most networks are eager for shows to be good. They want great shows. They want a hit. They want something that people like. So their initial intent is, I want to believe in you. When you piss them off, then it goes to a bad place. They can be thin-skinned and they can get pissed off more quickly than you can. And sometimes it's our job, and Nancy does a lot of this, to try to keep the communication going between the network and the writer. Writers in stereotype frequently tend to be more insular and not necessarily always the best communicators in stereotype, not always true. So sometimes we need, or the producer needs, to help facilitate that communication. I think most of our experiences with cable networks have been pretty good. Not all of them, but most of them. And usually when they're harder is when the writer, sometimes for very understandable reasons, has kind of turned his or her back on the network or gotten pissed off at them, and then you get into one of those downward spiral things.
Are they skilled, the executives? I mean, do they know the profession, or is it just, could they be selling anything else?
It depends. It depends on the play. I mean, look, I think network executives of some level of seniority are smart. They're not stupid people. What their level of diplomacy with writers is and their skill with that is variable, but they're not stupid. So when they read something and they say, I have a problem with X, it's usually not like, what the fuck are they talking about? Usually it's coming from some intelligent place. Some networks senior people are more articulate than others. Some have more charm than others. You get down to the lower levels, you get some people who are like, why did that person have this job? But usually once you get up to a certain level, there's smart people.
Okay, so one final question. Yes.
From my own point of view, because I tried to attract foreign productions to Sweden, and you obviously have a great slate of Scandinavian content now. Do you ever consider coming back to Scandinavia and shoot here?
Okay, so the question was, could you ever consider coming here to shoot your American version? I mean, there was the British Wallander, for example, shot in Sweden.
You actually lead to a bigger question. I mean, We would love, I mean, there's no point in us shooting here unless we're shooting as if we really were here. I mean, there's no point in shooting a show that's meant to be set in LA, but we're shooting it in Stockholm. Although stranger things have been done. But you know, we are still fighting an American prejudice in terms of networks about shows being about America. So although there are exceptions, and again, we can name them, most American networks will tell you American audiences care more about Americans in America than they care about Norwegians in Norway or Russians in Russia, or
even Americans in Norway.
Yeah. So it's very hard. You know, so you know, I mean, forget Scandinavia. We've tried to sell shows that are set in Europe that still have American principal characters that are set in Europe. We have a few, but it's much harder. Remaking things is much easier, but finding shows that are legitimately set in Europe, that are here day in and day out, it's not impossible, but it's difficult. So we would love to. We'd love to shoot out of the country, and play it for out of the country.
And having said that, next week we're going out with a script we developed internally that is set in Europe and it's period. So we'll see.
So forget everything.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you so much to the panel.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.